reading of the gospel lesson. And normally, we have a gospel lesson in our worship. But this morning, there is no lesson from any of the Gospels. Instead, our text for this morning comes from the book of Genesis. You may recall reading this as you were reading through Genesis in the same book, same page exercise where many of us are engaged in. All people on the earth had one language and the same words. When they traveled east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them hard." They used bricks for stones and asphalt for mortar. They said, "Come, let's build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. And let's make a name for ourselves so that we won't be dispersed over all the earth." Then the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the humans built. And the Lord said, "There's now one people and they all have one language. This is what they've begun to do, and now all that they plan to do will be possible for them. Come, let's go down and mix up the language there so they won't understand each other's language." Then the Lord dispersed them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore it is named Babel, because there the Lord mixed up the language of all the earth. And there the Lord dispersed them over all the earth. This is the Word of God, the people of God. Thanks be to God. Well, this morning we're beginning a new series that's titled Goodbye, Scare City. And the reality is, there's a lot of scary stuff out there. And a lot of us do live in Scare City. The sense that there's not enough drives greed, fear, exclusionary behavior. You know, if I let you in, there won't be enough for me. And we begin to live in Scare City, where it seems that death, starvation, feelings of being overwhelmed and being swallowed up seem to be lurking around every corner, ready to jump out and grab us. The good news is, it ain't true. It's an illusion. It is not true. A spiritual journey into the truth of abundance. Oh, we still have Mitch. Somehow I think that's mislabeled. That was Pastor Deb's slide. Although I like that, I've got that actually hanging on my wall. I think Jesus does have a sense of humor. I mean, just look around, look at who he calls to follow him. And who he calls to be his pastors. He's got to have a sense of humor. But a spiritual journey into the truth of abundance offers us an alternative vision of where to live our lives. This series hopefully will have us saying goodbye, Scare City, and have us traveling to the vast open spaces, habitats of God's amazing, abounding love and grace. The mantra of human nature, and it's certainly true today, but it's really been true a long time, is more, 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 more. Ever heard of John D. Rockefeller Jr.? Guy was pretty rich. He was a millionaire back when $1 million was a lot of money. Someone once asked him, said, "Mr. Rockefeller, you're like the richest man in America. When's enough enough?" And he says, "When I have just a little bit more." Now, most of us will never be on that kind of a scale in terms of our bank balances, but emotionally, we get old John D. More, more, more. And like skyscrapers that begin to loom over us, casting a shadow on everything below, our quest for more power, more prestige, more wealth, more domination, have created a culture of impressive not enoughness. We're overwhelmed, we're overworked, and we're overstressed. Our perspective of how much we actually have is skewed by the immensity of the images that we see, and they're so attractive about what we ought to have. So I want us to realize when we talk about scarcity, run those two words together. What do you get? Scarcity. Right. And it's a myth. Hopefully we can expose that myth, set it aside, and focus on abundance. Architects, now, when they're building skyscrapers, they keep going up, right? And they have now designed flexibility into the frames so that the buildings move with the wind, right? Our cities are so filled with skyscraping boxes that we've created whole new weather and wind patterns in many of our cities. Those steel and concrete canyons. You know, I've even experienced times when I've been driving in Chicago, and depending upon the height of the building and things like that, all of a sudden I can't, I lose my GPS signal because it's being blocked. But thank you, Mitch. Probably got mislabeled, so thank you. Appreciate that. I remember back when I was practicing law, I needed to take some depositions, which are, take sworn testimony that's taken outside of court, of some sailors that were at Great Lakes. And so I went from Indianapolis up to Chicago, where one of my law school classmates was with a firm on like the 90-something floor of what was then called the Sears Tower. So I distinctly remember riding in the elevator, and in addition to feeling it go up, I felt it go back and forth. And then I'm sitting in the conference room, taking the depositions, and I see the room moving. That did not give me feelings of security. I've never really been tempted. I guess there's a skybox somewhere that you can go out there. And they've got all the glass, and you can walk out over the. Yeah, no.
On the other side. Yeah.
But we build those skyscrapers, those huge towers, and cities compete. Who's got the tallest building in this city? Who's got the tallest in the world? I think it's in Dubai now, I think, right? Is that there? Yeah. And we see those as symbols of security, but remember what happened to the Twin Towers on September 11th, 2001. I mean, those of us who watched it happen as it happened, or who have seen the videos later, I mean, those images are indelibly burned into our memory, aren't they? And suddenly, what had been viewed as a symbol of security and power was reduced to rubble. We tend to see towers, don't we? A lot like the people of Babel did. It says, remember what it says. They used bricks for stone and asphalt for mortar. They said, come, let's build for ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky, and let's make a name for ourselves so that we won't be dispersed over all the earth. Now, a little bit of context here. You may remember this from your same page, same book, same page readings. But this event happened after what? Do you remember? After the flood. Okay, so there had been the great flood, Noah and his family, the faithful remnant, the animals marching on 2 by 2. Great account about God's hitting the reboot button. And then they continued on from that. Okay? So they had come out of that period where God was so angry at the sinfulness of humanity that He had caused the great flood. And they were the faithful remnant. And then they done what human beings do in terms of biological processes. They had reproduced. They started forming a people. This was a people that was formed out of the remnant on the ark, if you will. Whether we understand that literally or metaphorically, that's the context that it's in. But they'd forgotten that. You know, if we go back even further, right? We go back to Adam and Eve. You know, their original sin. The original sin was not the act of eating the fruit. Their original sin was doing what God had told them, one that God had said don't do. And the scriptures tell us they did it because they wanted to know what God knows. They wanted to be their own God. They wanted to be the center of the universe. So we lose Eden. That human tendency we call original sin continues on. Results in the flood. The faithful remnant is saved. Humanity, it rebuilds, if you will. But they've forgotten that. And there they are. They're saying, well, this is our opportunity, right? To build for ourselves a city. To make a name for ourselves. Do you see the self-centeredness that the people had? And God knew where that was going to lead. The problem with original sin is there's nothing original about it. I mean, we still do it. There's that inherent tendency within each of us as human beings to want to know what God knows, to be the center of our own universe, if not the universe of other people. I love what Eugene Peterson in his message, paraphrase of the scriptures, puts the account this way. He says, at one time the whole earth spoke the same language. It so happened that as they moved out of the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and settled down. They said to one another, come, let's make bricks and fire them well. They used brick for stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, come, let's build ourselves a city and a tower that reaches heaven. Okay? There's no longer going to be that physical separation between humanity in heaven. Let's make ourselves famous, so we won't be scattered here and there across the earth. And going on, he said, God took one look and said, one people, one language. Like, this is only a first step. No telling what they'll come up with next. They'll stop at nothing. God knew where it was headed. They'll stop at nothing. God realized that God was not a part of the people's process from concept to construction. It was all about them. This was humanity's first attempt to build a humanistic society. One that was centered on human beings and leaving God out. Now, remember, God's command had been to be fruitful and to cover the earth. And that order had been ignored. They were staying together. There's another part of the story sometimes that we tend to lose sight of. Those ancient folks, again, whether we understand that literally or metaphorically, decided we're going to stay together, we're going to stay put. Kind of like some of our small groups. You know, we love each other so much we can't split up and start more new groups. We want to stay together in our own little holy huddle. They wanted to be famous. They wanted to make a name for themselves. So they built this monstrous exercise in self-promotion. Did you know that Harvard University, that great Ivy League school, one of the truly great universities in the world, started out as a religious school? And during the construction of Emerson Hall, there at Harvard, President Charles Eliot invited the eminent psychologist and philosopher William James, brilliant mind, to suggest a suitable inscription for the main door of the building. So James suggested a line from the Greek philosopher Protagoras, which was, "Man is the measure of all things." Now, President Eliot didn't really care for that, and instead he chose a verse from the 8th Psalm. What is man that thou art mindful of him? Now consider those two, okay? Man is the measure of all things. What is man that thou art mindful of him? There's a heck of a divide between those two, isn't there? There's a great distance between a human-centered and a God-centered point of view. Arnold Glasow was a writer for the Wall Street Journal, and he once wrote that if we had our way, most of us would choose the front of the bus, the back of the church, and the center of attention. And that's pretty well nailed us, hasn't it? Huh? And those ancient people who built that Tower of Babel, they wanted to be the center of attention. And when we want to be the center of attention, we're so tempted to be scared, to be afraid, to think, if I'm not the center of attention and you are, then I lose. And so we start focusing on what we don't have instead of on what we do have. And what we do have is God. The Apostle Paul, in that passage from the second letter to the Corinthians. We don't know what the thorn in his side was. I mean, scholars they have fussed and fought and debated over what that might have been. We don't know. All we know is apparently it really hurt. And Paul said, I prayed 3 times. Take it away from me. Make it stop hurting. And Paul got an answer, but it wasn't the answer he was looking for when he started praying. God said, Paul, my grace is enough for you. Because power is best revealed in weakness. And so many times I think we lose sight of that God provides so wonderfully and abundantly and eternally for us. Yeah, I'm not naive, and you're not naive. I mean, there's stuff out there that is scary. Problems that are in the world, disease, economic uncertainty. I mean, yeah, but we can face those things. I'm not here trying to tell you to ignore them, pretend they're not there. What I'm saying is, you don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be afraid because God's grace is enough. God has provided so wonderfully, so abundantly for us. Now, in those scary times, and forever. So, let's say bye-bye, scarcity. Amen.